This is The Morning, and I'm Steve Schmidt. Today, I'm here to answer some of your questions. The question is, can we create better laws to better protect our democracy in the future? And the answer to that question is, of course, yes. We live in a democracy, which means we can pass laws. And the way you pass laws is by prevailing as citizens, as part of a movement, upon legislative bodies to pass legislation, and then upon the executive branch to sign legislation. The reality is that the United States, at the moment of its birth, lacked the majesty of monarchy. All of America's founders were treasonous Englishmen. They rejected the king. But the era was one of great pageantry and affected mannerisms. And so when you read the words, the letters of the era, of the time, there's great flourishes of vocabulary trying to express sentiment and meaning. And so there is a process of majesty that's instilled by our founders as a substitute for monarchy, the mechanisms of the republic as a process by which votes are counted is given a type of sacredness through ritual. And part of that ritual is the certification of the electors, which is mandated to take place on January 6th. Now, the time between the election and the inauguration is long. It used to be longer in the United States. Inauguration Day used to be on March the 4th. It was truncated because it was viewed, the time frame, as unnecessarily long in threatening the security of the country. The transition was deemed as prohibitive because it was dangerous. So the transition was truncated. At the end of the day, what the MAGA movement did under Trump's direct orders, under his incitements, under his direction, is weaponize these moments, turn them against the Republic. What they did is take ritual and turn it into debate, confusing the country, spreading a lie that now half the country roughly believes, that the loser was in fact the winner of the presidential election, which was stolen from him, which is a recipe for mayhem, chaos, and violence. It is a recipe for dictatorship. It is the most dangerous sentiment, a poison, a cancer that could conceivably be injected into any democracy. And that's what all of this is about. The question is, why is Lara Trump running the RNC? And why is she telling the American people through a robocall that there was massive election fraud in 2020 when there was, in fact, absolutely no election fraud in 2020 of any substantial meaning, and certainly none that affected the outcome of the election? The first part to the question is, why is Lara Trump running the RNC? Is very simple. Lara Trump is a type of lesser Ivanka who has retired from Trump life, apparently, to live on Billionaire Island in Florida after doing immense damage to the United States of America with her husband, Jared Kushner, who took $2 billion of Saudi money 6 months after walking out of the Oval Office with daily access to the president's daily briefings. But I digress. Ivanka, like Jared, was in the White House because of nepotism. And that's why Lara Trump is at the RNC. She has been appointed to be the co-chairman of the third oldest political party in the world because she married Eric Trump. In the end, though, if you think about it, somebody was apt to do it, and she was the one. And so from that day to this day is how she got to be running the RNC. There are no discernible qualifications, accomplishments, successes of any type, of any nature that would seem to qualify her for the position beyond that. She's also there because she will steal as many resources from as many old lady donors who are writing checks $5 at a time to the RNC grifters, now headed by Lara Trump, who are stealing the money out of their Social Security checks in the name of Donald Trump. All of this money is being directed not really to the cause of electing Republicans, but to the cause of Donald Trump, his lifestyle, his legal bills, his accumulations of various madnesses and insanities. So Lara Trump, who reportedly Donald Trump, who is never particularly cared for, has ingratiated herself by being the say-anything daughter-in-law for sedition, insurrection, what have you, at any time. She'll defend any white supremacy, any nationalism, any religious kookery, nuttery, or grift at any moment at the drop of a hat to please the Donald, which is why she's running the RNC. But again, Lara Trump is at the RNC because without a second hesitation, she will tell the American people the most poisonous of lies. Because Lara Trump doesn't care about her country. She cares about the camera and how she looks on it. She cares about the affection of America's most wretched man. She cares about money. She cares about power. But she doesn't care about America. She doesn't care about the sacrifices of 1 million patriots over 248 years that carved the country into being. The people who saved it, the people who redeemed it, the people who stormed the beaches to kill the fascists who sought to enslave the world. She doesn't care about any of that. Lara Trump cares about celebrity, about power. So why is Lara Trump at the RNC? She's not as good a con man as her father-in-law, or probably even her fraud husband, or her fraud brother-in-law, or her fraud sister-in-law. But she's good enough on her own, good enough at least to be the co-chair of the Republican National Committee in 2024. The question is, do I think that President Biden reaching out to Governor Chris Christie will make a difference in the outcome of the election? Well, let me answer the question directly and indirectly. Do I think the phone call, the act of Joe Biden calling Chris Christie will change the outcome of the election? No. Do I think it's a moment like Sergeant Shriver arranging for President Kennedy to call Coretta Scott King when Martin Luther King was imprisoned that swayed the election and the affections of millions of Black voters? No. But do I think it could be consequential in shaping the outcome of the election by sending a signal that this is a moment unlike any other and that the president understands that all hands must be on deck? That what we are defending is a system, a way of life, a civilization against an onslaught, a threat that this isn't about Joe Biden. It's not about the Democratic Party. It's not about his ambitions for a second term. It's about a defense of something bigger than all of us. And Chris Christie did not make any compromises in 2024. All of us are works in progress, including Chris Christie, who I have been brutally critical of on this platform. But Chris Christie can deliver a message. Chris Christie can rattle Trump. Chris Christie can follow Donald Trump all around the country and draw blood, proverbially speaking. Why wouldn't President Biden pick up the phone and ask Chris Christie to stand with him? Let me ask a question. Wouldn't it be an electrifying moment if Barack Obama walked out onto the stage at the Democratic National Convention and quieted the crowd and then asked President Clinton to join him, and they both asked the crowd to quiet down, and they introduced an old adversary, an old friend, President George W. Bush, who walks out? It's time to think big and expansively. There are only two sides in this debate. There's an American side and there's a MAGA side. There is no patriotism to be found within the MAGA cause. It is a fascist cause that seeks vengeance and retribution. It must be opposed by patriots. Why not reach out to a patriot of the opposition? It's either laziness, entitlement, or stupefying arrogance. Or maybe just plain old stupidity. But whatever it is, there's no excuse for it. And so, yes, President Biden should pick up the phone to any person who can be an ally to great effect, who can strike for freedom and liberty against a fascist cause with agility and forcefulness. And Chris Christie can do that. And Joe Biden needs Chris Christie because we all need each other. The way that Donald Trump wins the election is a combination of the fanaticism and intensity of his base, plus the indifference of a vast population that says, we don't like the choice. We wish that it wasn't Biden because he's too old versus Trump. So we tune out. That's how Trump wins. That apathy is a vote for Trump. The call to Christie says there can be no apathy. This is a unique moment. We all stand together in a common cause. And this includes, by the way, Nikki Haley, who has a decision to make. She can redeem herself or deepen the hole that she's made for herself, morally, ethically, but most importantly, as an American. She served an awful and wretched cause. Will she answer the call to an imperfect but worthy one in a dangerous moment? Donald Trump is trying to tear down our alliances. Donald Trump is rooting for a Russian victory in a country that is a prelude to an expanding war in Europe against our NATO allies that will involve American youth, our young men and women going to fight. We have a chance as a country to stop it. And that's why President Biden should make that phone call. And it's why whoever has told him that Chris Christie isn't worth his time is a fucking moron. and should be fired, if you ask me. The question is, why can't we impeach Clarence Thomas? And the short answer to the question is there's not the votes to impeach Clarence Thomas. If you attach wings to your back, you climb to your rooftop, and you jump off, promise you, you will not fly. You will crash to the ground and probably break a leg, maybe worse. Same thing with Clarence Thomas. Reality is a corrupt man with no ethics whatsoever, who has almost single-handedly destroyed the reputation of the United States Supreme Court, will serve a life term, because that's what the American Constitution calls for. When we nominate a Supreme Court justice, and they are confirmed by the Senate, they serve till the end. So there he sits, totem of corruption. And his legacy should be, more than anything else, never again should someone like Clarence Thomas be tolerated to rise to the nation's high court. It is an ignominious stain on the U.S. Senate, on the Judiciary Committee, on the broken process. It's one of the darker chapters in President Biden's career. It's just a shameful situation. But there he sits until he takes his last breath, if that's what he chooses to do, because that's what the American Constitution says. The question is why is Donald Trump saying religion is under fire?
Get out and vote. And you're going to have another group voting at levels that nobody's ever seen before. I call it Christian visibility. They're going to be visible because they're going to be at the polls. They're going to vote like they've never voted before, because everything, including religion, is under siege, and we're not going to let that happen.
Donald Trump is saying religion is under fire because he is trying to incite, trying to keep hot, trying to keep the coals as hot as possible for a segment of his base, which are the Christian nationalists. What they share in common with all parts of his base is they are fueled by grievance, and specifically imaginary grievance. This is an autocratic movement that is promising vengeance and retribution. And so in order for the vengeance and retribution to be just in their mind, the cause must be just. And so what Donald Trump is promising is to stop a persecution of the faithful by the demonic. There's a very dangerous Christian nationalist movement in America. It's the biggest threat to our domestic tranquility. It's a far greater threat to America than Islamic extremism. And that's why Donald Trump is saying what he's saying, to stoke grievance, because grievance fuels MAGA. Without grievance, MAGA would fall from the sky like a plane without an engine. Without wings, it would just drop. That's why. Thank you for listening to my political commentary. If you like what you heard today, please also consider subscribing to the Warning daily newsletter on Substack.